Welcome to the City. I'm Anthony Wilson, the Public Information Officer for the City of San Angelo. And joining us for our first segment today is our Director of Neighborhood and Family Services, Bob Solis. One of the divisions that Bob's department oversees is Animal Services, and we're here to talk with Bob about pet adoptions. Bob, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Now, right now, the city is negotiating a contract with Concho Valley Paws for Paws to start handling the adoption process out at the animal shelter. Explain why we're looking to partner with Paws in that sort of way.
Well, just like other departments in the city, we're always looking for ways to improve our processes, our services, and our programs. To that end, we are investigating outsourcing the adoption of animals at the shelter. Concho Valley Paws is a natural fit. We actually put out a request for proposal to other 501c3s in the area, and we got one back, and that was Concho Valley Paws. They, as an organization, they're experts at adoptions, while the city is not. Over the last several years, since I took over, the adoptions have increased pretty steadily. However, we want to continue increasing that. So that's kind of the concept, and the benefits are kind of twofold. One benefit is you get better adoptions, more adoptions, and secondly, we can loosen up a billet or a position to help increase the animal control services, which is really critical in the mission of the animal services division.
Well, Animal Services Division is the one that operates the animal shelter. And a lot of people are surprised to know that adoptions is not really part of the Animal Services Division's primary mission. It's something altogether different. Talk about what the main mission of Animal Services is.
You're exactly right. It's actually a secondary mission. The primary mission is animal control, the health and safety of animals and human beings and the citizens in San Angelo. That's our core mission, rabies control. And so when you talk about adoptions, it's as a secondary mission, we do it pretty good, but there's ways to improve, and this is one way of doing it.
So talk about how this proposed partnership sort of came about. How did you begin, initiating talks with Concho Valley Paws about this possibility?
Well, actually, we talked with staff and other members, and the idea has been floating around for a long time. This is not our idea. I believe we tried it about 5 years ago. It didn't work, so we're kind of dusting off the plan and see if it works. So it's nothing new.
You mentioned that you think the adoption process can be improved with a group like Concho Valley Paws administering that process. Talk a little bit about how you think that process could be improved.
Well, actually, we get a 2-for-1 in manpower. The idea is going to be pretty seamless for citizens to go out there to the shelter to adopt. When you walk in, instead of turning left, you'll be going right, and you're going to have 2 people there to assist you. Concho Valley Paws is very good at adoptions. They also provide additional services such as counseling, which we don't regularly do on a regular basis now. In fact, we don't do it at all, other than just cursory counseling, if you will. But they're very good at that, and I think it's a good fit. So we're going to try it, and hopefully it'll work.
What do you think the benefit to Paws of this will be?
Well, I think Paws will benefit for a couple of reasons. First of all, they'll be able to increase their adoptions on their own, and not the shelter animals, but their program. So that gives them a little bit of exposure. So I believe that will help them.
And of course, you mentioned the citizens, and I think that's the most important aspect. How do you think that citizens are going to benefit from this potential change?
Well, I think they'll get more professional individuals there to help you adopt. They'll provide the training. They'll provide some counseling, which we don't get right now.
And when you talk about counseling, you're just talking about the adopter letting the adoptee sort of know what's involved with that particular breed or that that animal's
That's
personality?
exactly right, Anthony. It's right now, Council Valley Paws has been doing this for a long time. City staff, we're relatively new at it, to be honest with you. And like I said, it's not our primary mission. So I think it's going to benefit citizens they'll get more information. They'll get better information.
So talk about the details of the proposal. How would this work?
Well, right now we are looking at providing up to $60,000 to provide 2 individuals open at the same time during our hours of operation. And they'll be manning that station, if you will. So when a citizen comes in, it should be seamless to them. They walk in, they'll go to the adoption side, and Council Valley Paws will handle the whole entire process.
And so all the other functions of the animal shelter, intake and the care of the animals and the cleaning of the facility would still be done by city employees?
Absolutely. Nothing changes other than the adoption process. And that's important to let citizens know because, and the other thing we'll do is actually provide more manpower out in the street to provide better animal control services.
And talk a little bit about why that's important, because I know a lot of times people get frustrated that they may call about a stray in their neighborhood and they don't see an animal control officer right away. Talk about why it's important to try to increase the number of officers in the field.
I think providing that presence is going to give the citizens a better feeling. At least they'll be more secure in knowing that we'll be out there quicker, we'll be out there more often, and we'll be able to provide that service that's part of our mission. So yeah, I think they'll benefit from it.
And would those officers also be investigating cases of perhaps animal cruelty or unlicensed breeding, those sort of things?
Absolutely. Pretty much what we do now. Rabies control, dog bites, those kind of things that we do currently. We'll increase that. And we'll be faster at responding to situations.
So with PAWS handling the adoptions, talk about the sort of support that the city will be providing to them so that it is really a true partnership between those two entities.
Well, we will provide them not only funds, but we'll also provide them a location to work out of. They'll use some of our staff to help bring animals out so they can socialize. We will, and at that point, they really kind of take it on their own. It's their responsibility to run the adoption from point A to point B and come through the whole process.
Of course, in about the past year, we hired a veterinarian to care for the animals out there. Would we continue to have a city veterinarian on staff to provide the spay and the neuters of the adopted animals, and also to provide other treatments for those animals?
Well, right now, there's no immediate plans to rehire a veterinarian. We're going to keep the position open for perhaps relook at this at a future date. We're going to go back to the old process, which is taking it to partners, local veterinarians who want to partner with us. And then that's the process that was when we took over, and we'll probably continue that process.
So right now, adopting a dog costs $85, and of course that includes the alteration of the animal plus vaccines, microchipping, and licensing. Adopting a cat costs $50, and all the same services are covered by that $50 fee. Would the cost of adopting a pet change under this arrangement?
Negative. It will be the same fee schedule that was approved by council.
If this change were to take effect, when do you anticipate that happening?
Well, we're kind of hoping to start the first of the year in January. We'll go to council here, I guess, in December to see if they will approve, see if they will allow us to negotiate a contract.
I guess it's also important to note, too, that the city has really developed quite a close working relationship with all of the adoption groups, but it seems like with PAWS in particular.
Well, PAWS happens to be really the only local rescue group, a 501c3. We have others that we work with. In fact, I believe the last count was over 40, but they're statewide. So PAWS is, we've partnered with PAWS on various other events, such as adoption events, showcases, those kind of things. So they're a known entity. They're recognized 501c3 who adopt as a business. So we're pretty pleased to be working with Concho Valley Paws.
And what do you attribute that better working relationship with adoption groups, Paws in particular, to?
I just think that we're after the same thing. We want to save as many animals as we can, and that's the philosophy that the staff has taken on. That's the philosophy that the Animals Shelter Advisory Committee has taken on. So I think when we're all after the same mission, it makes it easier for cooperation.
You just touched on this very briefly a little earlier. You mentioned that adoptions are up, and I want to give you a chance to brag about your staff in the shelter out there, about what's happened with adoptions and euthanasia in the past several months.
Well, actually, the last couple of years, adoptions have gone from about an average of about 90 a month to over 115 a month on a steady basis. Euthanasia has gone down from high 70s, low 80s, down to 40% across the board. However, in the last almost 6 months, we have not euthanized any adoptable animal, and that is. I salute my staff for following for working hard at trying to meet that goal of trying to be a very low-kill facility, eventually maybe a no-kill facility.
Well, and if you haven't adopted or euthanized any adoptable animals over the past 6 months, doesn't that in effect make you a no-kill facility, at least for the time being?
Well, I think you're right. I think it does. And I think there's misunderstanding when we talk about no-kill. No-kill is really, there's going to be euthanization. It's going to happen. But if you keep it about 10%, an organization is considered a no-kill.
And of course, all the animals that are being euthanized right now are ones that aren't adoptable, either because they're feral or because they're suffering from some sort of illness or serious injury.
That's correct, Anthony. Right now, we do euthanize ferals because they're not adoptable. Sick, injured, those kind of dogs, cats, wildlife that comes in. People don't realize the intake that we have over at the animal shelter. It's pretty high. And one of the things we're trying to do is reduce that intake. So when we have adoptions that are up and euthanasia is down, one way to keep following the mission and try to meet our goal is to get it at the front end, which is breeders. Having an animal control officer out there more often will help us enforce some of the ordinances that are in place right now to keep illegal breeders and those kind of things.
And of course, another measure of the sort of job that's being done out there is your annual state inspection. Talk about what happened with the last annual state inspection.
Well, we do get inspected by the state. They have oversight of the facility, and they can't shut you down. They will give you a day notice. They show up, they do an investigation, and we recently got one about 4 or 5 months ago, and it passed with flying colors. He was very pleased with what we were doing. We had some few issues like infrastructure. We have to work on infrastructure. We have some plumbing issues that we have to, in the kennels that we have to work on, and so there's always a challenge to deal with.
Well, and with those infrastructure challenges, is there any possibility that we will see a new animal shelter anywhere on the near horizon?
I'm hoping. I think behind the scenes, we're always trying to work to find some funds to either rebuild, or build a brand new one. So I'm hopeful.
We've been talking with Bob Salas. He is the Director of Neighborhood and Family Services. And when we return, we'll learn a little bit about San Angelo's bus system. Welcome back. We are joined now by the Executive Director of the Concho Valley Council of Governments, John Austin Stokes, and we're going to be talking about local bus service here in San Angelo. John Austin, thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, for those unfamiliar with the Concho Valley Council of Governments, talk a little bit about who you are and what you do.
So the Concho Valley Council of Governments is a volunteer group of local governments that gets together to solve collaborative problems and policy issues. More simply put, what we do is we administer federal and state grants and programs out to a 14-county region. One of those programs happens to be Concho Valley Transit District.
And so talk about now the connection between the COG, the Council of Governments, the Concho Valley Transit District, and then local bus service.
Yeah, so the COG itself has run rural transit for the past couple of decades, going back probably 20, 30 years. Within the last 10 years, we entered into an agreement with the City of San Angelo to take over the local bus service as well. So in that time, we transitioned to a small urban and rural bus system. And again, that's all one program of the 10 different programs that we have at the Council of Governments.
And the bus service, of course, riders pay a very small fare that doesn't come close to covering the cost of the actual service itself. So how is local bus service funded?
I'm glad you said that because sometimes that's not realized. But local bus service is funded depending on what service. On the rural side, we get a lot of TxDOT funding, which is obviously state dollars. And some of that's even federal pass-through that goes through TxDOT. On the federal side, on the urban side, we're talking about federal money, which is FTA. And those grants primarily fund both the urban and rural side of transit. Now, we can't draw any of that money without a local cash contribution. And we rely on the City of San Angelo for a pretty significant chunk of money in order to draw down the urban services to provide the fixed route and paratransit services within the city limits.
And I think this contract is about to come before the City Council. If memory serves me, it's about $330,000 a year that the city contributes?
Yes, so we've done that, and that basically takes care of urban transit, so the 5 fixed routes. But we've also this year going to incorporate the Goodfellow route. It's always been a standalone agreement, and this year it'll all be folded together. So I think City Council could expect anywhere from about 380 in that range, I'm estimating, but before I'm at the next meeting.
So you mentioned very briefly there the number of bus routes that you have. So again, how many bus routes and how many riders are served typically?
We have 5 primary urban fixed routes that run around on hour loops within the city of San Angelo that originate and end at the multimodal facility on North Chadbourn. And then region-wide, we transport about 600 people per day, give or take.
And so what are some of the high traffic areas that are served by buses here in San Angelo?
I think to the casual observer, they would probably say that the high traffic areas are downtown, which, as I mentioned, makes sense because all the buses come back to the multimodal facility. But any place that basically sells goods that regular folks would need, so grocery stores, Walmarts, any places of entertainment like the movie theaters are generally high traffic stops.
And so what time of day is the service offered?
So Monday through Friday, we run from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. And then on Saturday, we start a little bit later because there's not much to work traffic, and we start at 7:30 and then run to 6:30 p.m.
And how long does a rider typically wait before a bus sort of passes by?
So the routes are on hour loops, and so a person can look at the website, and we hope to one day have technology in the buses that are tracking them to let the ridership know exactly where they are. But you're able to tell by looking at the website approximately what time each bus should be at each stop. And so it will be either on the half hour or they usually work in about 5-minute increments. And if somebody were to miss the bus by 5 minutes, then it obviously would take 1 hour to get back around.
And how much do riders pay for a bus ride?
So within the city of San Angelo, it's $1 for adults, and then it's 50 cents or a half fare for children or military or persons with disability.
Is there an option of buying some sort of like pass?
Yes, absolutely. You can go visit the folks at the depot, and they'll provide you with a month-long pass so that you're not having to come up with change every time you get on the bus.
And who typically is your ridership? What does your ridership consist of?
That's a great question, because I think that some people probably have a misconception of who rides the bus, and the answer really is it's kind of a myriad of everybody. Depending on what time of day you were to get on it, you might see somebody that's going to work in the morning, in the middle of the day. Someone might be going to the grocery store. In the afternoon, someone might be going to, like I said, the movie theater. And then on the weekends, we have folks that they use it not only to go and get groceries for the week, but they'll also use it to enjoy the nightlife around the community.
And so the folks who ride it, do they typically have their own transportation and just make use of bus so they don't have to drive, or do they really rely upon bus service to get them around
I would
town?
say right now, typically they rely on it. That's not a blanket statement. There are several people that just utilize it because maybe they came from another community that embraced transit more and were more familiar with the system, and so use it just because it's cheaper than having to fill up with gas. But by and large, our ridership right now, excluding the military personnel and ASU students, are dependent on the system.
So I know that you would very much like as many people as possible riding the bus. What are you trying to do to increase ridership?
So I've been at the COG for 3 years, and 2 years into it, I looked pretty hard at the numbers, and unfortunately, the way we were trending was pretty discouraging. The ridership was either stagnant or even declining in some areas, and our costs were increasing. Now, a lot of that can probably be attributed to oil and gas for a lot of different reasons. That was tearing up the roads, and so some of our rural buses we were having to maintain a lot more regularly than we would have ordinarily had to. People had easy access to jobs, and so people weren't as reliant on public transportation. And then, moreover, we had a hard time hiring drivers. As you can imagine, a little bit amount of money we were offering per hour really didn't compare to what an oil and gas company could give them, especially our CDL drivers. And so, all those things were happening, but we also sort of realized that we needed professional help. And so the board made the decision to bring in a management consultant. And that's where we got Vince Huerta, who's our general manager. He's from El Paso. And we tasked Vince early on with a couple different things. We said we need to focus on safety. We need to focus on efficiency. We need to focus on customer service. And so all those things we've done. And if you look at the different metrics that we measure efficiency and safety and all those things by, we've actually improved. Our complaints are down, accidents are down. And so the hope there is that the system, by being better, will encourage more ridership. And we've seen that. We've seen ridership increase over the past fiscal year.
And so what are the biggest obstacles that you face in convincing more people to leave their cars and pick up trucks at home and get on a city bus?
So I'm smiling because, you know, it's kind of a unique West Texas problem. And not to offend anybody, because I grew up out here, but it is sort of the land of F-250s. And I think a mistake that gets made in different levels of government around town, myself included, is we look at what Dallas is doing, or we look at what Austin's doing, and we say, well, why are they able to do it? We're not. And part of the problem is because the people that chose to live there embrace some of those things. And so, whereas in Austin they might embrace, and this is a sore subject, recycling a little quicker than we would out here, or public transportation, the folks out here aren't necessarily going to do it. So, all that being said, I think we can only be who we are. And the only thing we can do is be really good at who we are, and which is what we're trying to do, and then hope that people will dip their toe into the water. So our hope is that a choice rider might one day, maybe on a Friday or something along those lines, get on the bus as opposed to taking their car to work and realize that it's an efficient way to get there, or maybe even take it out to happy hour one day and spread the word. And so in addition to trying to improve the system, we're really hoping that people will getting the word out about it, that people will utilize it and then start to realize that, hey, there's something here.
You mentioned a little bit earlier that you provide special services for Goodfellow Air Force Base personnel and for students at Angelo State University. First, talk about the Goodfellow personnel. What do you do in order to serve them?
So that was actually an initiative of the city of San Angelo. I got to give credit where credit's due, and they fund it. And what they saw was that there was a need. There was a lot of base personnel or folks that were in here for classes that were out there with no transportation whatsoever, and we wanted them to enjoy our city. And so we funded this route that runs on Friday and Saturday. It runs from about, I want to say, 6:30 p.m. on Friday to about 1:30 in the morning, and then it starts a little bit earlier, maybe 11:30 in the morning or around lunch on Saturday to about 1:30 in the morning. And so it's for base personnel or students out there who don't have access to transportation, so that they can get around town and sort of enjoy the community, and again, as I mentioned, be able to go and have access to groceries and whatever else they might need. It's been a great service.
And so what's the ridership like on that, and how much do the personnel pay?
So the personnel on that pay 50 cents because it's a half fare because they're military. And the ridership it's ebbed and flowed. And fortunately, we've been able to develop a really good relationship with base leadership, and then obviously with the leadership at the city of San Angelo, so that when we needed to tweak that route to maximize ridership, we've been able to do it. And so we monitor it pretty closely. We have those numbers available, the Monday after the routes run, and we can look at it. And if there's a dip, we'll get on the phone with Colonel Downs or whoever's stationed out there and say, okay, here's, what do we need to do? And we've been able to rebound it pretty quickly by just making little tweaks.
So the base helps to sort of market the service, if you will, to their personnel.
They have to be careful because they, as a federally funded group, they can't endorse us over any of the other transportation providers in town, either the transit providers, taxi cab providers, and things like that. But they absolutely have opened us with welcome arms and helped us get on base and do other things that have really increased the ridership.
So maybe a 50-cent ride sort of sells itself.
You would hope so.
Yeah. What about Angelo State University students? What do you do for them?
So Angelo State, and the students named that route, which I think is really cool, is the Ram Tram. They saw what we were doing with Goodfellow and said, hey, I think that might benefit us too. They have a lot of students who are here from foreign countries that didn't bring a vehicle at all. And so they knew that there was a lot of need during the day for people to get around town. And then they also knew that they had a high percentage of their population that was enjoying downtown. And I don't want to, exclude any other parts of nightlife around town, but there were other places around town that they were going to in the evening, and they just frankly needed a safe ride home. And so Dr. May kind of pushed the idea, and we sat down, and I got to give a lot of credit to Major Hoffines, who's now the MPO director, and we figured out a way to do it. And ASU actually pays for the entire thing, and so their students ride for free on that route, and it runs the same hours as Goodfellow. And I really, I have to give credit to the leadership at both the city and at ASU and Goodfellow for making those things work, because without those good partnerships, those would be almost impossible to keep functional.
Now, your ridership or your routes have historically been a flag down service where if they're driving down the street and someone waves them down, they'll stop and pick it up. And I know you're trying to transition away from that. Talk about that a little bit.
So basically right now, or as it is today, if you see the bus driving down the route and you're a potential rider or a customer of ours, you can flag down the bus and it will stop. The issue with that is as our system's grown and ridership's increased, it becomes more and more inefficient. And so while it was very advantageous maybe to the particular rider who was able to utilize it that way, it becomes a situation of, again, efficiency in that we've got unpredictability in how often the bus is going to stop. And so in order to resolve all that, we've decided that we're going to transition to a bus stop system. And so we've got an agreement in place with the City of San Angelo. They're currently putting up bus stop signs around town. We've also got an agreement with the Downtown Lions Club, and they're out preeing up our bus stop benches. And we will transition to a full bus stop system, which is what most communities of our size, and when I say most, I mean almost all of the communities of our size running transit do, in order to make it a more predictable and reliable system for the riders.
And so when do you anticipate that change is going to take effect?
So there's of course red tape that has to be cut. We're one of the things that we are having to deal with is the easements. And so we're working with TxDOT to make sure that any signs on their easements, pass all of the things that they need to pass with them. And so we're hopeful that by the beginning of February, but as with anything, it'll take some time, and then there'll need to be an adjustment period too, because we established exactly where the bus stops would be, but we knew full well that would need to be adjusted. So we'll have those stops, but then as complaints come in or as we get notified, we'll be able to get a better idea of where new stops need to be and things of that nature.
Last question: if people want more information about bus service, how can they go about getting that?
So, like I said, one of the things that we tasked Vince with was customer service, and so he's done a good job at that. So one of the easiest ways to get any information about the transit district is to call our customer service number at the 1-800 number. And the other thing, if you're more technologically inclined or you prefer to look at things visually, is to check out our website. We've got a really good IT guy, and he put together a great website, cvt.org, and it's got great comprehensive information. It's got route maps, it's got times, it's got phone numbers, it's got holiday schedules, and so either of those things, and I think we're going to be able to help you out.
We've been talking with John Austin Stokes. He's the Executive Director of the Concho Valley Council of Governments, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode of The City.